Hi, everyone. Some of you may know me. My name is Nathan Janisek. I am our community outreach specialist here at Hennepin County. Just wanted to give a warm welcome to everyone tonight. Thank you so much for being here. I just want to begin by acknowledging all of the time, energy, and effort that all of you and your organizations have contributed this year, engaging those voters in your community. And whether that's you assisting with registering voters, providing outreach materials, attending or tabling events, or just helping ensure the transparency and accessibility of elections, your efforts really, truly made a difference. The debrief today, kind of like Sam said, is just an opportunity for us to reflect, not just on the outcomes of this year's elections, but on the process of it. And how voter engagement works in these elections. It's just a chance where we can take a step back and look at what went well and identify areas for improvement and begin shaping the path forward into future elections. So just a little bit of an agenda for the evening. We'll be going over a quick data presentation from the 2025 races here in Hennepin County and a little bit looking elsewhere. We'll hear from a panel of dedicated organizations doing voter engagement work in their communities, and then open the floor for constructive feedback. This is a space intended for learning and collaboration, and a chance to just grow and try and reduce as many barriers as we can in the future. As we do move through today's agenda, I encourage everyone to share their insights in the chat, ask questions, and listen with curiosity. This goal for our event is to have an open discussion about how the election went and where to go forward into the midterms next year. Once again, thank you all for being here so much and for all that you do. We can go ahead and get started with a data presentation from Carl Landskroner, also from Hennepin County.
Thank you. I got my screen wasn't letting me click on the audio thing. It was like just below my toolbar, which was really frustrating. So with that, I will start the screen share. All right, great. So looks like all of you can see this now. Awesome. So yeah, thank you again, Nate, and thank all of you for being here to talk about the election we just had here in 2025, as well as what we can do moving forward into 2026. So we'll talk a little bit about voter turnout, some interesting numbers and stats that we've seen so far as we've looked at the election that just happened. And yeah, so kind of is a big overview. The 2025 election in Hennepin County set records for turnout. We had over 218,000 votes cast across 8 municipal elections and 11 school board districts. 3 cities elected their mayor, 28 city council members, 22 municipal board offices, and a state senator were elected across the county. The state senator was in a special election that we had just one little precinct of, but it counts. These elections were contested by over 130 candidates, and a sign of how engaged the electorate was, something I found interesting, was 99 of these 130 candidates received over 5% of the vote, which was really, really interesting. In addition to this, didn't go into a lot of detail around the school board candidates, because school board districts are really weird in odd years especially, but we had an additional 42 candidates for school board across the county. So just a little bit about what we did here at Hennepin County, specifically our voter engagement department or division, is we attended over 40 events throughout the county. Our staff did, and engaged directly with over 1,100 voters. These events included things like express vote demonstrations, going to the state fair, library events, and other events throughout the community. We did a pickle ballot one that was really fun. And yeah, in addition to these events, we contracted with 10 organizations, some of whom are on this call and will hear from later on the panel, to do voter engagement work in the communities they served. A few examples of these are YouthLink, who worked with unhoused youth, the Native American Community Development Institute, NACD, who engaged the Native American community, and then Fairvote Minnesota, who on our panel, who worked on educating voters around ranked choice voting. We also held regular meetings with community partner organizations to share information and resources around voting. And as we talk about the data behind this election, I just want to shout out all of our partners and contract organizations who did so much to contribute to the high turnout we saw this year, and really helped drive the way to the engagement that we saw and why this election was such a success. Yeah, this is kind of just a 50,000-foot overview of turnout in Hennepin County since 2017. We see on the top here is turnout, then absentee rate, and then how many people who voted registered on election day. One thing I'll preface, like all of this talk around this election is like odd years are odd. That's what we say in our office. And like, it's really true. Like some cities have elections, some don't. Some cities change elections from year to year. So it's really hard to find a good apples to apples comparison when looking at the 2025 election. So we'll do the best we can. Just kind of know that as you look in this, if something seems a little wacky, that's probably why there are just different offices up. So the key takeaway from this chart that I look at is that turnout has gone up steadily since 2017 in each four-year cycle. So it's gone from 29% to 35% in 2021, up to 39% this year. And I did find it a little interesting that the absentee rate has stayed relatively steady for the county as a whole, especially with the permanent absentee list coming out, and this year voters could request an absentee ballot for their city elections for the first time online. So I don't really know the reason for that, but just thought that was a little interesting to see. Yeah, so now moving on to, these are the cities that have regularly scheduled elections in Hennepin County in the odd years. So Bloomington, Golden Valley, Hopkins, Minneapolis, Minnetonka, St. Anthony, and St. Louis Park. And we see a little bit more context on why where the turnout changes come from. And without getting into the weeds of like all of these cities, because the dynamics of the elections are so all over the place and impossible to really research and accurately describe, I just want to give a couple examples of interesting data points that we found in this chart. So you can kind of see here in 2019, Minneapolis didn't have any scheduled elections, so that spot's obviously blank. Bloomington in 2023, you'll see on the far left, has a much higher turnout rate. That's because that year, because of redistricting, they voted for, I think, mayor, all four of their ward council seats, an at-large council seat, and a special election for another at-large seat. So it was like every office, basically. And so turnout was obviously higher then. This year, they were only voting on two ward seats out of their four wards and a at-large council seat. So, it's not surprising to see turnout go down a little bit, but still, impressive that it's up from what it was 4 years before. Looking at Minneapolis, obviously Minneapolis has had turnout increasing in all of their mayoral elections since 2013. But we do see the dip here in 2023, and that's because they had only city council on the ballot. So there were some wards like my own that only had one candidate on the ballot. Turnout was obviously going to be lower then. So that's the reason for the kind of dip there. And again, another example of why these odd years are hard to really look at and get a clear comparison picture. The most interesting thing that I found looking at the turnout data was in St. Louis Park in 2021, you see they have a very, very low turnout rate of 14%. When you looked into this, it's because of the 4 city council seats they were voting on, 3 of them were unopposed in 2021. In 2025, this year, only one of those council races was unopposed and saw a nearly 20% turnout jump in Ward 1, which had been previously unopposed. And then this year had 3 candidates who all received over 25% in a competitive race. And obviously, while it's pretty, I think we kind of know that the more competitive a race is, the more people are going to participate and show up. But I think it's important as we do our voter engagement work to remember that we need candidates. The first step of that is for candidates to put their name in and to run for office and compete. And that's really the thing that we can all encourage the public, as we talk to people who want to get engaged in voting, is make that suggestion. And so we obviously hope that we see more candidates competing and more competitive elections going forward. A quick national comparison, only because I thought this was kind of cool. I want to see how Hennepin County and Minneapolis especially did compared to some of the other big elections we just saw a few weeks ago. And in Minneapolis this year, we had higher turnout, or we had the same turnout as they did in Virginia when they were voting for governor, as well as like all of their statewide offices and legislature. And we're 5 points higher than on New Jersey, who had a 50% turnout. So that was really cool that we beat two states that were voting on, their governor and for, really big offices just in a local election. And then even looking at Hennepin County as a whole, our turnout was 39% countywide. And New York City, which obviously had a whole bunch of press and coverage, and people were really excited for across the country to tune into that race, our turnout in the county was roughly the same as New York City. And I think that's just a really big testament to how lucky we are here in Hennepin County, Minnesota, Minneapolis, to have such a civically engaged population and such high turnout already, that we're already so far ahead of lots of other states in terms of our ability to engage voters. And again, it's just another testament to all of the work that all of our partners and all of you on the call have been doing to make sure we have good turnout. So a couple more quick slides here. This is one that I actually found maybe the most interesting of all the data we looked at from this election, though it might be a little harder to kind of see on the screen. But basically, the top chart here in blue, we see the turnout for the cities that voted this year in 2024 in the presidential election. You'll see those numbers are super, super high. And then in purple, they go down a lot for this year's election. But what was really interesting is that Minneapolis had the lowest, comparatively still 79%, but the lowest turnout of these cities in 2024, yet only had a 23-point drop in turnout going into this election, which really tells me, I think, that we have a lot of voters in the suburbs who are regular voters, people who vote all the time in presidential years and midterm years, are registered active voters, but are not getting out and showing up for municipal years. And I think that's a huge voting block that we can work on engaging. And yeah, especially in these civic years. And obviously, we know that Minneapolis draws a lot of attention, so they're going to get probably higher turnout most years. Saw that we had a lot of calls to our office on election day from voters in Brooklyn Park or other cities without elections, saying they went to their polling location thinking there was an election because they heard Minneapolis was having one, didn't know that they didn't have an election. So we all know that, but I think these are a good sign that we have a lot of voters we still can engage, especially in those suburban communities. Quickly then, turnout by age. I'll go over kind of fast, but we kind of know that turnout is generally higher in a presidential year than in a odd year election. And that's kind of the trend that we see. We see in 2023, turnout average age was about 53 years old. This year was about 50 and a half. In 2020, it was, a little over 48 years old. So yeah, that kind of shows us that we do have a slightly older electorate in these odd years. But that said, this year was a little bit interesting because the average age was about the same as it was in the midterm in 2022 across the county. I also thought it was a little interesting that in this year we saw the share of voters 18 to 24 decrease pretty substantially, which is something that I know we all are passionate about working to overcome. But at the same time, we saw a slight increase in share of voters 25 to 34 and 35 to 44. So shows that there might be a little bit more movement here on, not the young voters, but people who have maybe had a couple election cycles getting more engaged. So yeah, this is our last slide here, and it has a little bit more information here. So kind of bear with I explain the background of what kind of the reasons for ballots to be rejected. This slide goes over the reasons why absentee ballots are rejected, and one of the big reasons why we think that we're seeing an increase in some ballots to be rejected. So kind of first of all, to start off, don't get worried or scared off by this chart. Over 95% of ballots are successfully returned and accepted by our offices. The ones that are rejected for any of these reasons will have a replacement ballot sent back to them, and most of those voters are still able and do cast their ballots. So, we see these big numbers. This doesn't mean that we're having a whole bunch of people who aren't having their absentee ballots counted and don't get the chance to vote. That said, let's kind of quickly recap a couple of the reasons why ballots are rejected. First of all, voters will either forget to have a witness or forget to have that witness sign their witness envelope. Voters who requested an absentee ballot might request their ballot with their driver's license number and then put the last for their social when they return the ballot, or vice versa. And if we don't have number that they put on their ballot on file, we can't accept their ballot. And then also voters who aren't who aren't registered, don't fill out their voter registration form when they return it. So up until 2025, we see that witness issues were really the far away the leading cause for ballots to be rejected. 2020 was a weird year with witness requirements. We can ignore that. Not ignore, don't need to focus on that. But we see that kind of recently in 2024, that rate of voters who are under ID signatures, so had a ID or signature mismatch, is increasing, is now is the most common reason for voters to be having their ballots rejected. We think this is probably due to two reasons. One, in 2025, the legislature relaxed the witness requirement. So instead of needing to be a registered Minnesota voter, you just need to be a U.S. citizen over the age of 18. This would have been a huge help for me in college because I didn't know any Minnesotans. I was in North Carolina and had to go to the bank to get a notary to sign my ballot. But up until then, a lot of people would send back their ballots with, someone who didn't live in Minnesota or wasn't registered, so that would cause their ballot to be rejected. Now, the reason why we think that the signature one is increasing is that the permanent absentee ballot application launched in 2024, meaning that just with that application, voters are being sent a ballot for every election. This is obviously a great change that makes voting more accessible and easier for people to vote, but it also means that if you signed up for a ballot in 2024 going to 2026, you might not remember what number you put on your application. You may think you put your driver's license number, put your social security number when you turn your ballot, and then find out that your ballot's getting rejected. So we have seen a higher rate of these ballots being rejected for ID signature reasons from people on the permanent absentee list. And I just want to make sure that we're, as we're doing our education, reminding people to either put down both numbers or contact us and we can help them verify what number they used, or putting down both is obviously ideal. If we have both numbers on file, so if we have your driver's license and last four of your social, we'll accept your ballot as long as one of those numbers matches in our system. But if we don't, then that's just an unfortunate circumstance. And as I said, unfortunately, we're seeing more voters who are on the permanent list getting their ballots rejected for that signature reason. Again, just because with that amount of time, it's hard to remember what you put down. When you were signing up for a FC ballot 3 months before an election, you were more likely to remember. So again, as we move into 2026, just want to encourage folks to remind people to, fill out their ballots correctly when they return it. Make sure all that information is there because, we don't want to have any votes that go to waste because, someone missed the line before they returned it and then don't have the chance to vote. So that's kind of the portion that I have here. Feel free to put any more questions in chat. I'd love to dig deeper into the data with you anytime, so feel free to reach out. And I can pass it back over to Sam for our panel.
Thank you, Carl. We do have one question for you, and this could be something you might want to follow up on. But is there any information you have available on BIPOC voter turnout with Hennepin County?
Not at the current moment. We could do some, digging into addresses and where people are voting, but we don't collect that information. So it's hard to say for certain right now what that would be, except for just kind of looking at general precinct trends and maps. I think one, some encouraging sign, I think, what is it, Ward 9 in Minneapolis, which has a very high Hispanic and Somali community, had one of the larger increases in turnout this year, I think. So that would be a good sign, but I don't have anything specific yet.
That's okay. Well, yeah, if any other questions pop up, feel free to reach out, put them in the chat, and Carl can follow up. I'm going to introduce our panel next. And first, I'm going to go one by one with each panelist, and we can hear more about their organization's mission and a little bit short introduction about their voter engagement work that they did this year. So I'm going to start with Noah. Noah Chan is the field manager with Future of Us. Future of Us, and Noah, you can add to this, but I know you build vibrant communities, kind of reading off of your mission statement, but building vibrant communities and channeling individual agency and power to cultivate bold Asian organizers, and that you equip young Asian Americans to become change makers in their own communities through various programs that you all do. I also, the League of Women Voters Minnesota, helped at the last minute to reach out via a phone bank to more lower turnout voters. Would love to hear more about that and your organization's mission and the work that you did this year.
Thanks so much, Sam. That was actually right on the nose. That's pretty much exactly our mission. I don't even really want to repeat it verbatim, but I'll just repeat the last part, which is like through advocacy, organizing, and youth empowerment, we're creating a future where Asian Americans are politically engaged and represented at all levels of society. And that is unfortunately the challenge that we're seeing right now. Lots of Asian Americans in Minnesota and across the nation are not as politically engaged as we would like to see. And we focus on youth and young Asian Minnesotans. And we do a variety of things, but I lead our election organizing. And this year we did 4 phases of phone banking. We did one, a research phase, finding out how people feel about the current federal government and the state government, where people got their news and how often they voted. We did a voter education phase, which was like telling people about the elections and giving them different resources. We also did a third phase, which is voter persuasion. This is just an extension of the voter education, but trying to actually use different tactics to convince people to vote if they were not interested. And then, like Sam mentioned, we had a fourth phase, which was the get out the vote effort. We did a ton of calls over the course of 2 days, and we had 2 shifts. And specifically for this get out the vote, we were calling Minneapolis and St. Paul because those two had elections, and we're particularly calling people 18 to 35. And that was the same for the entire year because as you had just shown earlier in your presentation, lots of people over the age of 35 are voting pretty frequently. So we're trying to focus on youth and young voters. This year, we were able to contact 2,665 Asian American Pacific Islanders. We were able to secure 549 voter pledges, meaning they said, yes, you can count on me to vote. We learned that it's actually a little easier to just ask the question instead of ask permission for like a survey, because when we're calling, there's certain information we want to know. Do you know about the election? How do you feel about this or that? And when we were asking them if they had time for a survey, people were ready to say no and hang up. But if we just went directly into the first question without asking, they were more likely to fill out the survey. And, some of that's a dynamic of cold calling people's houses and just trying to get the ball rolling as soon as possible. But other work that we did was that we held a mayoral candidate forum in partnership with a few other nonprofit organizations. And then we also supported a St. Paul candidate forum that Cappy had hosted at the Minneapolis Candidate Forum. We saw 7 lovely candidates and 40 lovely attendees. It was not a debate. It was a forum with structured questions directly from the community. All the candidates were very respectable. I felt like people got a good snapshot about what they look like, hopefully helped their rankings. And then I would say 3 of my takeaways just for this question would be that most Asian American and Pacific Islanders get their news online, especially Gen Z. And so that's going to be a huge tool working forward to share to those folks when elections are and why they should vote. We also know that most Asian Pacific Islanders that we had surveyed in the first phase feel very poorly about the federal government, reasoning among immigration, rising costs, human rights, safety, and a few other subjects. But I'll stop there for now just to make sure we have enough time for everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much, Noah. That's a lot of great work, and we can follow up and would love to hear more from you. But next, I want to move over to Peter. Peter Ale is the communications manager with Fairvote, Minnesota. And many of you may already be familiar with Fairvote, but they are a leading education advocacy organization around ranked choice voting. But we'd love to hear more from you, Peter, about what Fair Vote's mission is and also some of the voter engagement work that you did in 2025.
Yeah, absolutely. So like you said, Fair Vote Minnesota, we really focus on ranked choice voting education in these municipal years. So there's 4 ranked choice voting cities in Hennepin County: Minneapolis, Bloomington, Minnetonka, and St. Louis Park. And yeah, we basically let voters know what RCV is if they're a new voter and might not be familiar. We remind people that they're able to rank in these elections, so they can maybe go back, flesh out their research a little bit more. If they were only planning on voting for one candidate, now they have additional choices that they can research. And dispelling misinformation, whether innocuous or whether planted by other actors, and making sure people are clear-eyed about what RCV is and what it allows them to do. Some highlights from our efforts this year: we attended more than 70 events across Hennepin County this year. We attended league events actually in all 4 cities. Yes, Minneapolis, Bloomington, St. Louis Park, and Minnetonka, I believe. And we were able to provide voter education there in conjunction with the league. So thank you for members of those chapters who invited us to be there. We attended other voter forums and community events as well, all across the metro, and it was great being there. Another part of our program was hosting a series of events, one of them being a very popular meet and greet with all 5 Minneapolis mayoral candidates who were at that time running. We held that in the summer. It was a great event, great to get candidates talking about why they should be people's second choices and third choices as well, not just why they should be people's first choices. It was great to see candidates wearing each other's buttons, wearing each other's stickers, really getting into the spirit of the events and of ranked choice voting. We held a similar event in Bloomington later in the year, in the fall, with all Bloomington candidates and all were invited. Most showed up, and it was a great opportunity to get voters some info in some races that might have been a little bit harder to get that info in. Another key part of our programming was training for candidates. So we know no matter how many voters we can get in front of and get our message to as an organization, candidates are always doing more. So candidate education is a big part of our education platform, making sure they're not spreading disinformation either intentionally or by accident, making sure they know how to talk about ranked choice voting with voters, the importance of asking for second and third choice votes. So we held 3 trainings this year, 2 in person, 1 virtually. And we had about, I believe, 35 or 40 total candidates and campaign staff attend those, which was great. And we saw lots of great stuff out of those campaigns later in the year. Let's see, we've produced a number of materials, including voter guides with candidate pictures and resources on where to find more information about the candidates, which we found to be especially useful in lower information races that weren't being necessarily covered on the front page of the Star Tribune. We produce other educational handouts for ranked choice voting like we usually do. We produce videos and just trying to hit people where they are, hit people on all channels. And yeah, that's kind of some of the highlights of our programming. And I'll send it back to Sam.
Thank you, Peter. And before I pass down to Matria, I want to add some from the league's work, voter engagement. We had, so far as of last week, almost 40,000 views of our candidate forums online. So thanks to our local leagues who hosted at least 61% covered at least 61% of the local races happening in Minnesota this year, and that could be even more because some were combined into one forum. So thank you to our local leagues for all the work that they did to inform voters this year. And furthermore, they also helped us get over 60% of candidates to respond to our voter guide, which is an online resource for voters to use by entering their address and getting information on their candidates and where they go to vote. And we had over 35,000 users so far who tuned in to Vote 411 in 2025. So great improvements from previous years, and looking forward to continuing that. But I want to introduce Matria Reeder, who's the executive director of the Youth Voter Project. They are an organization, if you aren't familiar with them already, you need to be. I'm really excited to share more about their work with you. They started just last year and have already expanded to do a lot more voter education from just pre-registering voters, not just, but all the work that you've done in schools with ambassadors. So would really love to hear from you, Matria, and just what the Youth Voter Project's mission is and your work in 2025 and since even last year, a little bit of that work, if you wouldn't mind sharing.
Yeah, of course. And I just want to first say, my name's Matria, and thanks so much for having me. And I also wanted to say that I really appreciate all of the work that everyone here is doing too, because I am, as a senior in high school, a first-time voter this November, and I actually use a lot of the resources that people have been working on here and really similar resources in my own community as a first-time voter. So this is really exciting, and I wanted to just say thank you all for your work and thanks for having me here. But again, my name is Matria Reeder, and I am the executive director of the Youth Voter Project, which is a nonpartisan nonprofit that focuses on by youth, for youth, voter education and information resource services. So we were founded last year by a good friend of mine, Marcus Westman, who is currently a freshman in college. And we mostly work to pre-register youth in their respective schools through a process with student ambassador representatives from those schools that hold their voter drives during their school day. We have also this year introduced a new voter education campaign, as we know that voter pre-registration is very fortunately getting traction throughout the state in things like AP Classroom, voter pre-registration portals, and voter pre-registration when you sign up for a driver's license for the first time. So as these laws are kind of getting phased in, we have focused a lot of our work on voter education resources as well as just getting them pre-registered. Because something that I noticed personally throughout my own communities, myself, and as I worked on the Youth Voter Project last year as our PR director before I got promoted to my role now as executive director, is that as we give out this information about voting and about pre-registration, a lot of youth face the issue of not necessarily being as informed as they could possibly be. So one of my personal goals as the executive director this year was to launch our voter education campaign, which happened through a series of social media posts, a lot of media and online content, and also the creation of our voter guides, which are nonpartisan information that covers sort of frequently asked questions such as, where is my polling place? How do local elections impact me as a young person in Minnesota? What elections happen each year? When are my gubernatorial elections? When are my federal elections that I can vote in? And I find that getting this information out when these young people are still not necessarily eligible to vote, but they're looking at maybe a couple years down the road casting their ballot for the first time, this helps a lot of voter engagement, youth voter turnout, and also people just feeling like they have the resources to go and vote for the first time when they become eligible. I also find that our process of having ambassadors go and speak to their own classmates and peers within schools one gives leadership opportunities to these ambassadors that allows them to put this experience on their college applications, but also get more involved in the civic education world so that they have other opportunities down the line. And it also, I find, makes it a lot easier to give this information out to large portions of the student body at once. If the people presenting this information look like them, they talk like them, they already have these pre-established relationships of, oh, this girl was in my math class and now she's tabling at my lunch with all of this, colorful resources and supplies and these banners. I'm going to go talk to them. So, our mission is to not only get more people to register and pre-register to vote, but it's to give them those resources so they feel as comfortable as possible being an informed voter so that it increases their ability to go out and vote for the first time in a safe and informed way. But also, it makes their experience better so that they want to go back and they want to re-engage themselves in this civic world. So what I want to say is we had a really successful year this year. Last year in our first year of operations, we actually pre-registered over 2,400 students in schools, I think over 28 schools across Minnesota. And this year we had over 30 schools involved, and we're still tallying up the exact number of students we engaged with, but it is projected to be a lot more. So we had a really successful year, and we're just looking forward to expanding to more students, more schools, and getting more of our resources out there. But thank you.
Thank you, Matria, and we'll definitely come back and would love to hear more about what are the next steps? How can we support you? What's the growth look like for getting more schools involved? And so, but I want to go back to Noah, and these questions, I feel like you all have answered them in some way or another, but want to hit on any like barriers that you found by talking with voters that they have to participating. And then how did you all work to address them in your outreach this year?
Yes. Well, that is a really great question. It's something I'm still grappling with now. I would say the biggest overarching barrier for this entire year was just voter disillusionment and disengagement from politics overall. I found that although, like in the beginning, this is my first time being a field manager, first time organizing phone canvassing or having a team of paid phone canvassers. Earlier on, we were trying to figure out like how do we motivate people to vote and like what's a good way to like persuade them, like what else can we give them, and we're kind of running into a wall because it wasn't like people who like want to vote, like their barrier is like I don't know who to vote for or like where to go, but there's an overwhelming majority of people we're trying to call that just do not even want to touch politics. I think it's APIA Vote. They did really great research last year during the big presidential election and found that a lot of voters are feeling very powerless about their vote. It's not that they don't care, it's just a lot of people are not seeing the turnouts that they want to see. I'm sure everyone's heard the saying like I don't get into politics or I'm not interested into politics. Or if they don't want to talk about politics, they can just click and hang up. But we're also, I think it's important to frame this issue also within a post-pandemic setting. We're coming out of a very, very challenging era of social isolation that changed the way that we interact with the human world. We saw a big collective turn towards the digital world. We saw how our US and state governments handle the spreading disease, the vaccinations, economic recessions, and social unrest. And that changed a lot of how people navigate their governments, feel about their governments, trust their governments. And before the pandemic, Future of Us had a pretty solid base of people who would show out to, help call people to get out the vote or door knock. And We did some virtual work, but you know, we're trying to build up more of our in-person engagement from people and just having a challenging time. But the way that we kind of want to approach things next year is to get back to face-to-face voter engagement. You know, in-person events. Obviously, we're going to have a candidate forum, but I would love for my team to do some door knocking and site-based canvassing to try and rebuild some of these trusting relationships and to better understand like where voters are coming from. It's not, you know, it's not the easiest, cleanest work to do, voter engagement. And, you know, I used to feel like we were bothering people because they didn't want to have a conversation. We wanted to start the conversation. But a young organizer at a beginner organizer training said, no, this is a public service. These people need to be engaged. And I really do view the voter disengagement as a national issue and that people need to be engaged. So we want to get back to face because statistically we're finding that people respond better to authentic face-to-face connection, which is a huge echo from pre-pandemic. We want to craft some nonpartisan messaging that really focuses on their real life issues. It's not enough to say like, we all have a responsibility to vote, but to say like down to earth things like families are getting torn apart. There's like deportation at our doorstep right now, or like costs are going to go up. And as a restaurant owner, that's going to be very hard for you, right? We also want to have, you know, consistent voter engagement and provide the traditional resources, but also experiment with some innovative tools. I don't know if other people saw Sahan Journal put out an article that included this interactive quiz for like, who should you vote for? Like, who's the best match for you? And I took that and I thought it was a really great way to engage voters, especially in a time that voters are kind of feeling like the word politics is like a hands-off kind of thing. And yeah, I think yeah, just like pivoting, adapting. API vote, specifically Kyle Van Fleet from there gave us a misinformation training. I got it twice or three times, and had my team get that too. There's a really great training from API vote about how to respond to things that are untrue, but approaching it with tact. We created a persuasion model. I'm really open to sharing that to people who are doing door knocking or in person. That's going to work a lot better in person than over the phone, from my experience. Shortening scripts, making them as short as possible, and just experimenting to see like what's going to stick or not. Like I have my canvassers take the script and really use it at the core messaging and questions, but I had them try to experiment with different framings, different speeds, putting it in your own words. And the more that they can make it sound like it's them saying it instead of script, and the more they can really put themselves into it, the better they can connect to the voter. But definitely still trying to look at different ways to overcome the voter disengagement, because it's really quite a big barrier right now.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Noah, for all. That's a lot to think about. But next, I want to go to Peter to see if you have any challenges you'd like to share, barriers, and how Fair Vote addressed them regarding ranked choice voting.
Yeah, we found that the biggest barrier tended to vary depending where you were. If you were in the suburbs, for example, it often was there's actually an election this year, and most people didn't, like a lot of people don't know that because they maybe have one weekly newspaper that gives a couple stories to it, but is overall kind of like a news desert out in some communities. And it's really hard to find information on these ward or district races that might only cover a few thousand people. So that's definitely one of the bigger problems we're finding in the suburbs, getting over that hump of reminding people that there is an election, reminding people that in these races they can rank, and trying to connect people with information on the candidates, because it can be really hard to find information on some of these candidates in smaller ward or district races. So the recordings that the League of Women Voters have had on their websites have been great. We've had our own guides to connect people with candidates' websites and other candidate resources. So that's kind of the biggest hump we had to get over there. And we addressed it through a combination of creating our own materials to connect people with information, as well as taking advantage of the work you all were doing. In Minneapolis, wasn't quite the same issue, though. Earlier on, still had to do some education that there was an election this year. The biggest issue was that there was a lot of misinformation going around with regards to ranked choice voting, whether intentional or not intentional. There was a lot of money and effort put into trying to get people to rank just one candidate and leave the other rankings blank. There were some candidates saying only rank me 3 times, which is not what we want to hear. And that's where our candidate trainings came into play. We found that those candidates who attended those specifically were really great about their messaging. And we're hoping to find ways to attract more candidates to those and dissuade them from putting out information that does disservice to both voters and themselves. As far as the issue of like independent expenditure groups or other groups putting out bad information, that's kind of harder to address. We have a press strategy to try to mitigate the effects of that in the press, making sure, for example, no one puts out any misinformation on election nights when initial first round results come out, making sure that no one thinks the election was rigged when someone overtakes another candidate in second choice votes or third choice votes. And yeah, just taking a holistic approach to the information environment to try to combat some of those efforts that we're seeing, which is unfortunate that we're starting to see those at the local level, importing that kind of information campaign in from the larger races and even years. And yeah, those are kind of the two main problems we're facing based on where we are. And so either reminding people there is an election and it's a ranked choice election, or reminding people to not overcomplicate things. You just rank your choices 1, 2, 3. And yeah, that's what we found.
Thank you, Peter. Well, next I want to give Matria a chance to answer any barriers that you all faced in your work, specifically with youth voters this year, and how you all work to address them.
Yeah, so a lot of the issues actually that I'd say the Youth Voter Project has been seeing is kind of problems that the organization itself has been created to mitigate. So it's not necessarily things that we've like run into in our work, but more issues that we have recognized in the world or in our communities and we've tried to tackle with the work that we do. So with that being said, I would say personally that the largest problem that I noticed in my work with my 2 years at the Youth Voter Project is sort of one, bridging the gap between, okay, we've registered these students now, how do we get them informed and get them engaged past just that one first initial step? And also sort of tackling the misconception that just because you are not of voting age yet doesn't mean that you can't be informed and also be influential regarding democracy. So one of the things that we really did that was super important to me personally was creating our voter guides. And these aren't traditional voter guides in the sense that they lay out different candidates and things like that. I actually have a photo pulled up and you won't be able to read the text, but I wanted to just kind of show a concept of the things that we've been doing. So this is a tri-fold voter pamphlet and it will look sort of like this and it'll fold into 3 sections. This is the inside. And these pamphlets tackle different questions, as I stated earlier, like how do I pre-register and register to vote? What elections happen on a yearly basis in both federal, local, and statewide areas? How do I research a candidate specifically? And how will my vote directly impact my own life? Because I have personally been seeing a lot of the questions that arise as we pre-register these voters, both from my experiences tabling in my own school and what I've heard from the other youth that we've worked with, is that there are a lot of, sources of information out there and a lot of sort of pushes for people to vote, but without the information that kind of comes subsequently with that, it sort of falls almost a little flat at points because there's so much rhetoric coming in about, how you should vote and look at what's going on in the federal or the statewide government. You should vote, you should have your voice heard. But a lot of the issues that we found arise are people trying to kind of take on that task themselves of becoming an informed voter without a lot of knowledge beforehand. So the problems that we've been trying to solve are how do we get this information into schools and how do we present it in an engaging way? Because, as we go into obviously a more digital age and as the attention spans of our youth get shorter, it becomes ultimately more difficult to get this information to them in a way that they're going to retain it and they're also going to take it on and bring it to their friends. So we have these engaging, these colorful voter guides, but we also put out a lot of these same sort of frequently asked questions and answers on our social media. We have a website and we have an Instagram and a TikTok account. So these are things that are a little bit more non-traditional, but what we've been doing within the Youth Voter Project is sort of playing with the non-traditional to see how we can most engage the younger generation because since their voter platforms are less engaged with right now because we're used to talking to older people that have aged into the demographics that they are right now and they're already in their scheduled patterns of voting. It's not necessarily like a neglect of younger voters, but it's figuring out how they work and figuring out how we can best engage them because it's a trial and error process. It's something that hasn't necessarily been done before because these are all first-time voters. It's our first time engaging with them. So a lot of the things that we've done to solve these problems are play with the ways that we can make information engaging and get it out to ultimately solve the root problem of bridging the gap between people that want to be informed and the information that gets to them. Because some of you, may have heard this before. Sam, you might have heard it earlier this weekend with me, but something that I always say when I speak to other groups of youth that want to become more engaged is that you don't need to be more educated or have a larger background to have a voice or be a participant in democracy. You need to be informed. And it's the job of the people with that information to spread it and get it to these larger groups of people. So that's the big problem that we've addressed and something that I think I can safely say we are on the track to solve.
Awesome. So that's a really great answer, and would love again to hear more about if any of your organizations have any information about what the work that you do and want others to follow up with you, please feel free to drop anything in the chat. But I do have one more question for the panelists, and then we want to give Michael a chance to close us out from the Office of Secretary of State. But the question in this might be an example you want to share from this year or thinking ahead to next year. I want to know, and it's going to be a big election year, a lot bigger. I mean, not a lot bigger. I know all of you here on the panel and on the call have done work in the 2025 election to turn out voters, but 2026, campaigns are going to start soon. It's going to be a long year. And I want to know what gives you hope to keep going as we go all the way from now until November. What is maybe an example from something you did this year, talking with someone, but just what gives you hope to continue to do this work that we're doing? And I'm just going to go back to the order of starting with Noah, and if you have an answer for me. Otherwise, you could pass it, but I'm sure you've got a good answer.
I do, Sam. And I'll try to keep it short and sweet so we can get everyone. I'll just start with that. It's clear that voters are really exhausted and disappointed by democracy that's kind of stuck between two parties and a general leadership system which does not serve them. And it inspired me to see engaged voters turn out this year in mass, like we saw in New York, to change systems which don't serve them, which proves that collective action can change outcomes. That's something we can point to as an example. It gives me hope that people might be feeling powerless, but when there is a leader who steps up, who can prove that he or she or they can be trusted, that people can break out of that and become empowered.
Nice. That was short and sweet. Peter, anything you've got?
Yeah, we were really encouraged to see not only the jumps in turnout, like in the headline numbers, but also the reduction in roll-off down ballot, reduction in the number of people who maybe cast a vote in the mayoral race, but didn't cast a vote in their local park board district race or something. We found that we've been crunching some of the numbers, and so far we found that a lot more people are voting in those down ballot races, and that's encouraging because more candidates are running in those races. More candidates are out there engaging with the electorate. We saw a lot of community organizations really engaging with down ballot races this year. So that's something that's been really encouraging to us, seeing people not just get excited about the headline candidates who are at the top of the ticket, but also getting really excited about races that 5-10 years ago would have been considered obscure and they would have skipped. So that's something we're looking forward to next year. Hopefully plays out in state legislative seats, another school board seats up for election next year. Hopefully people aren't just paying attention to attorney general, governor, senate, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a great
Pass it
reminder.
back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Matria, anything you've got?
Yeah, absolutely. The great thing about this is that I have so many answers to this question, but I'll also keep it short and sweet. But there were a large number of things that gave me personally hope this election. And I think that that's also because I spend so much time on the ground in the Youth Voter Project with a lot of really passionate young people. And the great thing about that is every time we hold a voter drive or we go to a specific event, there's always a small handful of people that are just the most excited you've ever seen to learn about the information that we have to give them. And we'll, give them extra resources. They'll get a little stack of their voter guides and say that they'll go out and they'll give it to their friends and their family. So that absolutely gives me hope. Something that also motivates me are the people that we've recruited to work with, because as we're more of a high school based organization, the people that we're working with also happen to be of very similar demographics to the people that we're like kind of marketing ourselves to. So we're a by youth for youth organization, and a lot of the people on our board are juniors and seniors in high school, and we had our annual fundraiser on Sunday night, which was really exciting. But something that really motivated me and gave me hope is all of the people that went to that and took away even more information to go and spread to their communities. So honestly, the real point of what gives me hope and motivates me is people that are so passionate about what we do and what I do and that share these passions, that they want to gather all of the information that they can and spread it to a larger community of people.
So true, so true. I think that inspires me too. And I'm sorry, Michael, we've really given you like only a couple minutes, but and thank you to the panelists for your wonderful work and responses to give us a lot to think about. And again, this recording will be available on our YouTube page. But Michael, anything you can do to get us even more fired up for 2026?
30 seconds, Sam. I threw out the script. On behalf of the planners, myself, Sam, Carl, and Nate, we want to thank the panelists, Matria, Noah, and Peter, for your experience and your perspective. And we want to thank all of you for showing up and caring about these issues. Going into 2026, we encourage you to take the words and the examples of our panelists and the folks from Hennepin County and use them as inspiration to do as broad a swath of contact with people. And as Matria so eloquently put, give them the information that they need to be confident to go into voting. And that's really what it's all about. Thank you for caring about this and about the people who are voters in the state of Minnesota. Have a great evening.